Now that Ms. Marvel has finished up, and I have finished a little staycation, I figured it's time to now review the series as a whole. Be warned, I will be talking spoilers in this video of some of the big elements, not everything, but a couple things that happen I will be mentioning in spoilers. So if you are not caught up on Ms. Marvel, do that before watching this. And if you would like to see individual reviews of each episode, I do have a playlist that I will link so you can watch those. I have an individual review of episode 1 all the way through 6. So if you're just looking for my thoughts on a specific thing, check those out. If you're just here to hear my thoughts on series as a whole, welcome. My cat's meowing. Ms. Marvel tells the story of a young Pakistani-American girl named Kamala Khan who is infatuated with superheroes, and particularly Captain Marvel, and learns that she herself has superpowers. Ms. Marvel, or Kamala Khan, is played by an actress named Iman Vellani. Now this is her first ever acting credit. Iman Vellani is fantastic as this character. This is up there with RDJ as Tony Stark, Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop. That's the kind of casting we have with Iman Vellani here. It also helps that in real life, she is a huge Marvel nerd. Go to the Reddit AMA she did the other day. Trust me, it's a goldmine. She's so full of charisma and just personality and enthusiasm, and it just makes me happy. It works for both the character and, the actress. And that's a good way to describe this show in general. It just makes me happy. When I'm watching Ms. Marvel, I have an ear-to-ear grin on my face. Well, for most I have an ear-to-ear grin on my face. It's so wholesome, pure, and heartwarming, and there's all these cool little touches like the animation that appears all over the walls, or the chalk outlines when Kamala's describing something, and just, those are so fun, and I don't know why the amount of them decreased as the show went on. That was a bummer, but those were such a sweet treat, and it was so different. Things like the relationship between Kamala and her friend Bruno, or her friend Nakia, and the entire Muslim community she's a part of, and even things like how she reacts when she secures a hot date, or her family. And her family's the highlight of the show. There are a few storylines that happened, and we're going to talk about the 6-episode format and all that later, but there's a few things that, there's a storyline involving Kamala's family, and that could have been the whole show. They could have, there's a hair on my computer, they could have cut out everything else from this and just done 6 episodes of Kamala Khan and her family, and this would be the best damn Disney Plus show they've put out. And her mom and dad even go on this really cool arc of them not wanting her to go out and do all these things and go to parties and whatnot and say she's not like Captain Marvel and all that. And it culminates with her mom making her super suit and her dad giving her the name Ms. Marvel, which might be my favorite scene in the whole series when he gives her the name.
Kamal means Marvel.
I share the same name as Carol frickin' Danvers.
Our own little Miss Marvel.
They are so lovable. In episode 3, it's Amir's wedding. That's Kamala's brother. And there's a scene of Kamala and her mom talk about how family's always there for each other and yada yada. It's really cool. And then it cuts to Amir and his dad having that same conversation pretty much. It's great. And this is probably why the middle portion of this series did not work for me. Episodes 1 and 2, I will go so far as to say were perfect. And it was on track if it had kept up that momentum to be my favorite Marvel show. Episode 3, it was a bit worse. It was still good, but there were a couple things in it that bothered me. Episode 4 comes in, it didn't work great for me, and episode 5 I just thought was awful. And the reason those last 2 episodes didn't work is because it took out everything that made the first half of the show great and replaced it with something new. The first 3 episodes of this show put Kamala Khan just in the city. She's in Jersey City. She goes to school. She deals with bullies and friends and romance and going to a college party or I guess a high school party. And, going to what's essentially in-universe Comic-Con and dealing with her parents. And we see the integration of Muslim culture, and Jersey City feels like a character. All of these things is what made those first few episodes work. Episodes 4 and 5 take all that out. They send Kamala and her mom to Pakistan, and then actively work to remove her mom from the story so they can send Kamala on a time-traveling adventure where she meets her great-grandmother, and then she also meets basically some ninjas who like all get killed off in the same episode, and it's a totally different show. The reason I like episode 6 so much is because it brings back everything that worked from those first few. It brings all of it back, and then it also takes the 2 things that worked from episodes 4 and 5 and brings that back into the story. And this might be the best final episode of one of these Disney Plus shows to date. I legitimately think the 6th episode of this show, they brought the series home. This series would have been super disappointing if the 6th episode was slightly worse than it was, but they managed to bring it home, and the writing got better. They kind of fixed what they were doing, and it's funny because I feel like in the writing process they knew they had screwed up, because they kill off the main villains, who we'll talk about shortly. They kill the main villains off in episode 5 and then just bring in Damage Control as the main antagonist in episode 6, which works so much better. So they take this story of like dimension jumping, get rid of it, and then just go back to the high school thing in the last episode. Now would be a pretty good time to talk about Kamala Khan's powers, because they changed her powers. In the comics, Kamala Khan's an Inhuman. We'll get back to that later. And she basically has the powers of Mr. Fantastic. She can stretch. She goes big hands. This show made her a Green Lantern. Kind of. A Green Lantern with limits. My understanding is she can't do everything, but God can she certainly do a lot. So she can make platforms to walk on, ramps to route trucks over. She can make a shield in front of her. She can make a giant dome shield around the entire area. And she can make big fists. And she can punch a hole to the center of the earth. I don't really understand this. In the final episode, she told Kamran to go, and she just goes bam and punches a hole, and then the shield's gone and he's gone. So did he go through the hole? Also, how is she able to punch a hole through the center of the earth? Limits, Marvel. Let me tell you something that I want to see happen in the Marvels. Put a limit on what Kamala Khan can do. Her powers are an ex machina. So let's reel them in a bit and put limits on what she's got, because she can do a lot of stuff right now. Now, I'm not a fan of the power change. I wish they had just kept it the same. So here's my theory. So Kevin Feige has said that the reason they changed the powers is there's a big story reason. We'll know why, right? There's a reason they changed the powers. Now, I would say we should trust Kevin Feige, but he also said that Moon Knight is very brutal and they were worried that audiences wouldn't be able to handle it. So I don't know if we can exactly trust Kevin Feige's word. Marvel had said the reason they changed Gore's design in Thor is to avoid Voldemort comparisons. Now, you don't just go and change Mr. Fantastic's powers, so I think the reason they changed Ms. Marvel's powers is because less people know her, so it'd be easier to just change it. And 2, they didn't want people comparing her to Mr. Fantastic because for some reason, Marvel can't handle comparison. So just give me a reason, please, as to why you changed your powers. But on the bright side, at least she can do big hands. Because I was worried for a little bit that she wouldn't be able to, but she can. So she even says embiggen at one point. That was pretty fun. It did bother me that they skipped over her figuring out her powers. In episodes 2 and 3, she's very rusty. In episode 4, she has them mastered. I really wish Disney would stop with this stupid 6-episode format. And I know it's not a Marvel thing because it's happening with Star Wars also. They never have, they never will. It's not enough time to tell a story. It has hurt every single show so far. Moon Knight suffered from this. Falcon and Winter Soldier suffered from this. Hawkeye suffered from this. Loki suffered from this. Obi-Wan Kenobi suffered from this. 6 episodes does not work. And no show has suffered from this more than Ms. Marvel. There is so much of this show they do not get to explore. In fact, I would go as far as to say this should be the longest show. This show would have benefited from the Netflix 13-episode format, because after episode 5, we only have 1 episode left, but it feels like we need 7 more. Everything in Pakistan would have been great, as that arc alone needed 4 or 5 episodes to work, because they rushed so much along, but instead they had to cram multiple storylines, pretty much Kamala Khan's entire comic history, into like 4.5 hours of content. Here's how they should have done it. First season, Damage Control, that one girl who's like kind of second in command, who's not a great person, she's going after Kamala. And so we keep this simple, and we use it as Kamala just, kind of being introduced to this world. We get focus on the community, focus on the side characters more, and just have this idea of damage control as an antagonist looming there. And then she kind of fights back against them, gets respect within the community, becomes Miss Marvel, and go time traveling in season 2. Now, one of the biggest criticisms of this show, let me rephrase that, the biggest criticism of this show is the villains. The Clandestine. They suck. They are at the very bottom tier. They're in the F tier of Marvel villains. Now, they were evil pretty much just for the sake of being evil and never got the development they needed. One of the producers of the show had said that they had so many notes and they had written a bunch of material for the Clandestines, but they had to cut them out because of the 6-episode format. That to fit within time constraints, they had to take out everything they had written for the villains. What we get for the Clandestine, by the way, is awful. Like I said, they're evil just for the sake of being evil. I mean, hell, these are characters that attack Kamala about 15 minutes after meeting her and befriending her. They betray her in the same episode. And then they're just killed towards the end of episode 5 like they're nothing. Like they're just trash. It's the most anticlimactic, unsatisfactory, and uneventful death. They just kind of walk up to a thing and die. Not even the show cared about these guys. They replaced them with someone else in the final episode. What is the main chick's name? Without looking it up, tell me what the main chick's name is. What's Kamran's mom's name? I'll wait. Clandestine does introduce the character of Kamran, who I liked initially. It took me a second to figure out if he was really a good guy, but yeah, he was a nice guy. He was a good dude with good intentions, but he was also screwed over in like 3, 4, and 5. He was pretty much just dropped from the show. Comes back in episode 6, now he has powers, and he's like trying to kill people, and he's super pissed off, and it's such a departure from everything that this character was. It feels like a character assassination. The real villain of this series could have and should have just been Damage Control. In fact, they're the final villains and they make more sense as a villain. Not every story needs to be massive world-ending stakes. It's a little smaller scale story. That's what Damage Control provides. DODC, Department of Damage Control is just dicks, really. They're just dicks. They want to bring Kamala in because she has powers. They're slightly racist. It works for the story. And having those people threatening Kamala's community has more impact than the end of the world. And that's why the final episode's great. The final fight takes place in a school with 5 characters we like, basically doing Home Alone traps on Damage Control. That's so fun. That's so fun. And it feels so earned when they win. And Kamala is embraced as a new superhero by not just her parents, but by everyone, including the Damage Control soldiers who turn on their supervising officer at the very end to protect Miss Marvel. And that new suit, by the way, is awesome. It's one of the best suits in the MCU. I'm pissed that she's getting a new one for the Marvels. This show made one more big controversial comic change. At the ending of episode 6, they say that Kamala's DNA is altered, and that it's like a mutation, and then a hint of the X-Men 97 theme plays. That's huge. Because as I said, Kamala's an Inhuman in the comics. Now, it's pretty clear Kevin Feige has no intention of ever using the Inhumans. Hell, the one time he used an Inhuman, he blew him up 2 minutes later. So instead they made her a mutant. The MCU's first mutant. I want the Inhumans. It's so clear, though, that we're not going to get it. They have no intention of ever doing that. They'll start putting fucking Batman in the MCU and dealing with copyright infringement lawsuits before they bring Inhumans in. I'm sure they have some sort of plan, but the mutants are already such a massive corner of Marvel mythology that you don't need to take a character who's not a mutant and make her a mutant. Just use the mutants you have already. Wolverine, Deadpool, Xavier, Magneto, Iceman, Rogue, Kitty Pryde, Nightcrawler, Mystique, Sabretooth, Cyclops. Why do we need to make people who aren't mutants mutants? I just listed off like 11 amazing characters that Marvel Studios can now use whenever they want. This show was a much needed change of pace. It was a hero unlike any we've seen before, giving some representation to a group that's not represented enough on screen as the good guys. It introduced several characters that we could all grow to love. In fact, this show did the impossible, and it actually made me excited for the Marvels. I could care less about Captain Marvel. I hate her, in fact. The post-credit scene, it was like, yo, cool, Captain Marvel's here, but like, I don't really give a shit. But I love Miss Marvel. I love this character so much, and for that reason, I'm excited for the Marvel. Miss Marvel started off amazing. It had a mostly dreadful and disconnected second act, but then brought it home for the best episode of the season. Introduced a great character, and I cannot wait to see where Miss Marvel goes next. Well, there you guys go. That was my review of Miss Marvel as a series. What did you think of Miss Marvel? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, leave a like on this video, subscribe, click on the bell icon to receive all notifications from the MCU HQ. That's going to be it. Have a great day, guys.